everybody. Welcome to IFMA's webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our topic today is focusing on data everywhere, how Internet of Things or IoT is transforming facility management into data management. As you are joining us, we ask that you please like this page so that others will be able to find this great webinar. And then also in the comments, let us know where you're joining us from. We'd like to be able to say hi and give you a shout out. I am Kim Coffey. I'm with IFMA, and I'm joining you from Houston, Texas. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar. Pei Wu is the president and co-founder of MWBE Unite. Pei, please join me on the stage here, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Kim. Welcome, everyone. Today we have an exciting panel that we've put together of experts that will be exploring all different aspects of data everywhere, touching on IoT for the base building infrastructure, for the equipment, for the assets, and of course for the employee experience. I'm super excited to welcome our panelists. First up, we have Darlene Pope, who is the president of North America at PlanOn. Hello, Darlene.
Hi, Pei.
Darlene, as many of you know, is a smart building digital workplace expert. She's one of the original ones going back quite a couple of decades. She is a globally recognized visionary, passionate advocate for disruptive technology and the application to real estate. Darlene has 30 years of experience in smart building consulting and with prior executive roles as the global head of smart buildings for JLL and the global head of smart buildings and digital workplace for WeWork. And next up, we have Nikisha Saw. Nikisha. Hi, Nikisha. We're in the same backyard in New York City. Welcome, Nikisha. Nikisha is with Hines. She is a senior portfolio program manager for Hines and actually has impact across many of Hines's largest accounts. She comes to the table with 20 years of experience in corporate real estate and integrated workplace and facilities management. She provides operational excellence in Class A commercial office buildings, and her focus is actually in the nuts and bolts of environmental health, sustainability, safety, and of course, all things in DEI. And last but not least, we have Brian O'Connell. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Pei. Thanks for having me.
So Brian is the Executive Director of Digital Strategy for Otis Elevator Corp. He leads the Otis Global Digital Strategy and Transformation efforts through strategic partnerships and incubation. Otis became an independent company in 2020 from the United Technologies family. They started an accelerator group that is based in New York City and Hyderabad. And Brian leads that group in focusing on rapid prototyping and also commercialization of digital solutions with surfacing data as well as APIs for smart buildings and software as a service. And he is also one of the key leaders around all things incubator and innovation around Otis's efforts in IoT. And so thank you so much for making the time. All right. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we look forward to an engaging conversation about IoT. And if I could just tee up these slides, please. All right. So 30 minutes is not a lot of time when there's so much data that's coming from every direction, from strategy all the way through deployment, design, construction, operations, maintenance, and of course, all the decision enablement that occurs in our industry. And so what we'd love to do today is actually focus the conversation around lessons learned, around the stories, really evolving the focus beyond the nuts and bolts of building operations into what does it look like when you have data management challenges. And in the new world of IoT, how does that actually become more seamless in order to be able to track all the data, to answer questions around, return to office, around how can we actually improve our building operations. And then, of course, the employee experience side of it, how do we actually have systems talk to each other more in the future in order for the human experience to be improved. And so with that, if we could go to the next slide, Today, we're going to focus our conversation on these key areas. I'm not going to talk about the specific bullets because I think you'll hear it best from our panelists. And so with that, I'd like to open up for Darlene, if you wouldn't mind, talk to us about your current role today, and what you're seeing, given that you have been at the smart building, evolution for a long time.
Sure. So my role now, I'm the president of Plan-On for North America. So I run all of our operations for the US and Canada. I joined Plan-On about 2.5 years ago. As you know, my background has been in smart building consulting for the past 30 years. Prior to that, back when a smart building was a building that had high-speed internet. And the reason I bring that up is because now, fast forward 30 years, and IoT and the ability to share data among different systems was actually born out of that whole internet era. And now that we can get data out of the buildings, we can start to automate and get a tremendous amount of data that we couldn't get before. So when you look at buildings, they are generating terabytes of data on a daily basis. And the only way to handle all of that data and make sense of all that data is through software. And so Plan-On is a software company. We do integrated workplace management solutions for space management, energy management, real estate management, asset maintenance management, integrated services management. So really all of the data that's coming out of buildings, whether it's financial data, operational data, energy data, all that needs to be handled by some type of software so that we can visualize the data, we can make sense of it, we can sort out what data we don't need, but more importantly, we can start to correlate multiple data sets that you could never correlate before. And so I think the power of IoT and the power of that software is being able to get information that we couldn't get before and use that information in a manner that can help run the buildings a lot more efficiently. And so when you look at IoT, IoT is the Internet of Things. It's not sensors feeding up to a dashboard and showing data. It's literally things connecting to things and taking data from one thing and pushing it to another thing and automating a process so that we make it so much more efficient and we have the ability to automate things that used to be manual processes. So my role at Plan-On now is to help lead our customers into that world of IoT and data management, and also to start to connect to all the smart building components. That's kind of my other world, which is taking that data and feeding it to the physical building system so we can run the buildings much more efficiently.
Thanks, Darlene. So Nikisha, you're where the rubber meets the road when it comes to building operations. And you serve a lot of global real estate clients from a portfolio perspective. Can you share with us what you're seeing in your role around IoT and data from smart buildings and smart technologies?
Well, definitely. I think to Darlene's point, we've always been connected in the operating world to the data and the technology because we're maintaining the operations of a building. With IoT and it being able to connect these different tools and equipment into various different dashboards and reporting, as operators, we're able to tell a better story now of how our buildings are run, how they're being utilized, and then that helps to the bottom line of initiatives for our clients on how they want to either build out a space. And so it's very much part of my daily work that I kind of start to really tap into the data where I'm connecting, whether it's the FM team or the engineering team, and being able to take that data and do the connecting dots for them because they're busy doing the work, right? And so I think for organizations in thinking things programmatically across portfolios is really now being able to strategize and come up with that data management plan that will create the reports, that will create the KPIs. We'll be able to manage our vendors better. It just really, really builds to an environment where we can tell the story to our investors, the actual tenants in the building, the employees, and be able to tie all this together to this workplace experience, right? And so as we talk about the new world of the office, the workplace experience is key. And so for the on-site teams, it's being able to survey, what type of event works better in that space, is being able to look at the air quality in a space and really make an adjustment on what's happening outside to what's happening inside. And so very much I love what I do because I feel like I get to geek out with technology and learn it. And that's part of, why I think machine learning and artificial intelligence, as great as it is, we as humans will continuously learn and evolve with it so we can be better as we automate things.
That's great. Thanks, Nikisha. And Brian, can you share with us within Otis sort of what you're seeing around the digital innovation and the role that you play and how this all comes together?
Yeah, absolutely, Pei. I think there's been a variety of different elements, all based around human roles, as you said. So, from our perspective, there's always been a long history at Otis of using data from our controllers and different systems to be able to improve our service operation. So there's been a historical focus on the role of the mechanic and how do we put data in the hands of those individuals, as well as our remote experts to help quickly troubleshoot things. But the more interesting innovation and what's really advanced are some of the things Darlene mentioned around the connection of systems, both inside the building and outside. So as use cases evolve and customers become more sophisticated and demand more from what's going on in their buildings, we've seen everything from the use of service robots for like security patrol or food delivery or sanitation. And that's something that we've done at Otis to be able to integrate utilizing APIs and different IoT devices to autonomously enable those robots to take the elevator, to our role in the broader building management and facility management ecosystem. Talking to our customers, understanding what critical alerts and alarms we can provide, what service data we can provide, both to the broader facility management experts, or neck down to an individual who might just be sitting behind a security desk in one residential building. The important element is to be able to analyze across that broad swath of data, distill the insights that are important and are going to be actionable, and that we can then surface to the critical roles and humans, to your point, on who can kind of make use of that data in the building to run things more efficiently and hopefully, improve tenant and occupant experience. So, it's really been, especially post-COVID, a significant acceleration from my perspective of a lot of these new smart technologies, and the IoT infrastructure that might have originally been put there for more of a traditional maintenance aspect has actually started to become a jumping off point for some of these new innovations.
Yeah, that's great. It really, there's no time like present, right? So, for Darlene and those of us that have been around property technologies for a long time, we've seen it evolve, but there has never been a more sort of gelling time around the will to execute around technology in the buildings, which is great. And Brian, as you were talking, I was actually envisioning that at some point your robots going up the elevators are going to talk to the waste bins that Nikisha has in her buildings and let them know how much trash is coming in from the delivery, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of our ecosystem partners, like on the security patrol side, they've already started to look at how do they integrate with IWMS systems like Darlene's and the access control companies and security companies that might be patrolling a corporate office building. So, those touch points have already started to be made and they're becoming more standardized. And I think that'll just continue to improve both the efficiency and the passenger experience of everyone in these buildings.
I would definitely add that the back of the house work that happened for years that no one paid attention to, with the integration of IoT technology, that we now are front of the house. And so very much this data also improves how we are, gaining that hospitality, that touch and feel as operators. And so it's a very different world for both ends from our on-site teams. They now have the actual data in real time that they can respond with an answer, as opposed to, I remember way back when it would take me about an hour or 2 hours to really kind of get that information, whether it's from engineering to make a response. You now see that in real time and live because someone has a phone that they can connect to a work order system, or they can connect to the Otis system and immediately be able to tell you what's going on, how do we assess, and how do we correct it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Brian, to your point about the connections to the IWMS systems, I think ultimately the data has to sit somewhere. So, Darlene, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing across your client accounts in terms of how IWMS and Plan-On is specifically is looking at how the IoT data gets into the system?
Absolutely. And I think the number one use case that we're seeing right now is occupancy detection for the purpose of space management. And obviously the reason for that is because everyone's struggling with their return to office strategies and what percentage of the workforce is coming back. And so the largest demand that we see right now is for that real-time occupancy detection. And, some companies are able to use badge swipe data to get some type of indication of, trends, how many people are coming in on Mondays versus Tuesdays versus Wednesdays. And the challenge right now, though, is that badge swipe data, first of all, most buildings in the US don't have turnstiles or badge swipes in the first place. You just walk in and you go to unless you're in New York or Chicago or major metropolitan areas, we don't have that data to begin with. But more importantly, what we've seen now is that this old trend of buildings are going to be open from 8 to 5 and people are coming in from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, that's gone forever. We now live in a world of flexible work, of hybrid work, of work from anywhere. And so if you aren't able to gather data around the actual use of space day by day, hour by hour, floor by floor, room by room, there's no way that you can run your building efficiently. And there's no way that you can provide the comfort and the convenience that your occupants demand. So that's what we're seeing is our clients want real-time, literally desk by desk occupancy. And there's a lot of different ways that you can collect that data. I always say we're walking around with the number one occupancy detection device in our pockets. And we're really not utilizing that IoT device to the extent that we could indoors. So when you start taking a look at location-based services and the same types of IoT solutions that we use outside the building, we need to take a look at the application of those inside the building. So I would say space management is number one. And space management feeds into everything else because occupancy feeds into your indoor air quality. Occupancy feeds into your energy and sustainability metrics. Occupancy feeds into your carbon footprint, greenhouse gas emissions. So really number one data set right now and the application of IoT is around real-time location-based occupancy and space management.
And the ability to turn on all the systems and also turn off systems.
Turn off systems.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, then the building can respond to real-time data, right? So if the buildings are only 10 or 20% occupied, they shouldn't be running as if they're 80 or 90% occupied. And again, it's going to be different at 10 o'clock in the morning than it is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we used to run buildings on a time clock because we would assume that we would have X amount of occupancy Monday through Friday, and that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. And for so long, it's been the black box. Folks have been doing badge swipe analysis for decades, right? And that was the only data that we had. I'd love to hear other use cases, Brian, from, Otis elevators in terms of the point of transportation after the badge swipe. What are some of the other use cases that you're seeing in your world to inform the occupancy level by level?
Yeah, so probably the natural extension of the badge swipe is we have a lot of customers that look to us to say, do you have number of calls placed per source and destination floor? And we've created APIs to be able to feed that into a building management system, try to match it up with the data sets around badge swiping. We have other sensor partners or even some Otis developed products as well, using LiDAR and different sensors in the elevator lobbies to try to basically trip or better predictively park where elevators sit and more efficiently distribute people throughout the building. So in each of these cases, as Darlene mentioned, if You don't want the elevator kind of running up and down the building if it doesn't need to be from a sustainability and from a maintenance perspective. So taking into account what the occupancy flow is and the level of efficiency and people who are coming in and out during up peak and down peak times have become all the more important. And we've learned that a lot of our partners and customers also are interested in that data to be able to make informed decisions on how they might run their building based on, just a second set of either confirmation or potentially substitution data versus badge swipes.
Oh, that's great. And Nikisha, how does that change up the level of service that you would offer in the building? If you knew which floors they were going to and how many are actually going to those floors, how does that change up the way you service?
It definitely changes up, looking at where we might need additional cleaning services. If you're thinking about just daily operations, looking at the potential for event planning, knowing what spaces are being utilized and how people are arriving to that space also kind of gives you some time. As an FM, one of the things that we do, we walk our sites. And so even before we had actual technology, we were the people on the boots in the ground, seeing actual people coming, knowing that 10 a.m. was the time frame that mostly everyone was in the space. We knew what parts of the floor were highly occupied because we were actually walking the space. And so now with this data, we can correlate what we're seeing and what the actual data is telling us from the badge swipe, from the elevator rides, and being able to truly confirm in like a reporting tool, not just from what we see with our eyes, but to say to our clients that, yeah, you know what, we need to maybe reevaluate how this space is being utilized, because maybe everyone's preferring to go to one particular floor. If you're even thinking about a workspace with meeting spaces and conference rooms, what are the particular areas that teams feel more comfortable that they're utilizing that space? And so that's very much been a part of how we're reassessing the workspace and how we're going to respond. And then just also in just being proactive. I think the other part of that is at the beginning of a day for any on-site team, it's preparing for people to come on site. And so being able to have the sensor data that tells you the frequency of the week, how occupied a space is, you can plan to allocate your on-site teams to know that there's a particular floor that you need to look out for if there's things that are happening. And then we also plan for after hours. I think the other part of this conversation is that even before the pandemic, we were never fully occupied. There was just this assumption everyone was always in the office, but with work travel, with events, and we saw that data showed us we're only over at about maybe 60 to 70% occupied. But now when we're looking at returning to the office, we can take those numbers and evaluate how can we strategize what the workday experience looks like for our employees. So literally, to Brian's point, we're looking at when someone hits the door, how much time does it take for them to swipe that badge? If it's destination dispatch, what's the time frame to get up to their floor? How are our reception teams going to greet them? Where is it the timeline that they get from the turnstile or the door to the coffee machine in the cafe? And really kind of creating that journey map of an employee's workday that we can really now say this space was designed with the intent of what it should be. It meets the business. The employees are enjoying the space, and then we're also servicing them to create the most engaging experience that they can have. Because that's the other piece of the conversation, is that while we have people in the space and we're seeing their movement, what can we do to engage them to know that they're being productive, but also enjoying the space? Because everyone wants to come to work and enjoy work.
Yeah. Well, even, taking it one step further, aside from just the day-to-day operations, is the data now gives us the ability to see trends and to start predicting what's going to happen in the future. So if you know that your utilization is lower on Fridays than it is on Wednesdays, that feeds into maybe you order less chicken for the cafeteria on Fridays. But also not just to the building owner and property managers, but to the end user tenants. How do we use our space in a more efficient manner? Do we need more space? Do we need less space? Do we need more large conference rooms or small conference rooms? And so actually taking a look at the use of that space enables us to predict what's going to happen in the next month or in the next year going forward. And I think we really haven't seen the impact yet on commercial real estate because, for commercial real estate, they usually look at occupancy as percentage leased. So if you have a 1 million square foot building and you're 900,000 feet leased, you're 90% occupied. Whereas you may be only 20% occupied in terms of actual, people coming into the building. So I think that it's important in commercial real estate to start to see the trends around less and less people coming back to a physical office on a daily basis, and how that's going to impact the business when those leases start coming up for renewal. So it's not just day-to-day operations, it's future business. How do we repurpose that space to be able to utilize it better? And how do we also create that environment that entices people to want to come back to a physical office?
Yeah, and the predictive aspect of it is really important for the future, right? Because it's actually informed decisions. I'd love for you guys to maybe pivot a bit around the data itself being used for business cases. So the vision that we've just covered in the last, 5 to 10 minutes really is compelling in terms of, improving the experience, improving operations. For those that are on the call where their buildings or their landlords have not made the investment yet, can you provide a bit of commentary around how do you actually use the data that you have access to create business case for the change? Who wants to take that first?
I think I'll take it because I have two perspectives as a representative for an owner and also end user. I think very much on the end user side of things, when you're looking at the actual space that you're occupying, you now have the tools to go back to your landlord who's maybe having the difficult time of how much they want to invest in that infrastructure. Very much for landlords, it's finding the financial benefits that turns into their NOI when they're looking at how much capital improvement they want to do, whether it's elevator improvements, whether it's going into like New York City, looking at local law 97 and retro commissioning, what that looks like for their buildings. I think what happens very much in our industry, the relationship between the landlord and the tenant and occupiers really has to become a partnership because we're both solving for the same thing. We want our business to succeed. We want people to come into the office, and we want to be able to take what we know on both sides and come together and share that. And I think when we start to have those open conversations, it allows for the tenants who potentially might have a larger budget to maybe to contribute to the operational needs to do capital improvement projects. And so sometimes some occupiers might say, I don't want to do that. But I think when we're trying to find a solution, it's being able to come together and partner and look at the possible ways that we can share the burden to get to the end result, which is we want to be more operational efficient. We want to make sure that we're utilizing the space the best way possible. And it's a win-win for both the occupier and the landlord.
Well, and I also think when you take a look at the business case and the ROI for investment in technology, it depends upon what type of facility and what your business drivers are. So you may have different business drivers for corporate owner occupiers than you would for commercial investor properties that are multi-tenant. You're certainly going to have different business drivers for higher education, college campuses than you are for hospital or medical office buildings. So really understanding what the business drivers are for the owner and the occupiers is going to determine what your ROI metrics may look like. So are you looking for increased productivity and increased employee experience and increased happiness within the workplace? Or are you looking for higher rental rates and higher occupancy rates? With a college campus, are you looking for the student experience? So I really think you have to take those business drivers and determine what the metrics are that you need to measure in order to determine what the ROI is. And what IoT gives us the ability to do is collect a lot more data around those metrics than we could ever collect before. And what technology enables us to do is translate that data into meaningful insights. So kind of a long answer to a short question, but I think it all really depends upon what your primary business drivers are, what you're trying to accomplish.
That's great. Thank you. So Brian, talk a bit about the digital innovation side of things. Like what other tech are you guys piloting that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, we try to, first of all, we're in Otis. It's very important that doesn't have to be invented here. So, we have a lot of ecosystem partners that we look at, and we have an open, as part of my remit is really to be able to engage and look at what advances are taking place in the market and how we could leverage startups and other elements that are trying to break into the smart building space to help build those business cases. So, across building management systems, some like tenant apps, like basically customizable mobile apps that feature amenities in the building, as well as integration with the elevator, or the robotics partners I mentioned before. Probably work with about 100 different companies around the world from a variety of local markets and different tech spaces. Just to, basically because the elevator is part of their value proposition to deliver the end customer. We always try to look at innovation in terms of how it's delivering results to the building. To Darlene's point, there's a variety of different aspects of ROI that are customer, because the customer could be the facilities manager, it could be the building owner, it could be the passenger in the elevator, or just a tenant or a visitor. Those are all different things that we try to look at. How do you generate value there? So some quick examples, working with firms like Nikisha's, there's a variety of different things, whether it's like dry cleaning, parking inside the building, and being able to kind of like reserve an elevator to be able to do that at certain times in your day. It could be integration with visitor management systems. So if you're having a meeting at a building or at a WeWork, you want to be able to easily have a customer come in and be able to kind of get access to the building and get an elevator up to your floor. Being able to have Otis products and services that enable that and connect to that third-party visitor management system, and then can also confirm it, with the security personnel sitting behind the desk. Those types of data integrations and kind of quick action and visibility very clearly provides value, makes the entry and exit of a building a lot more seamless and frictionless, which hopefully, improves the overall tenant experience and can help, improve occupancy and overall customer satisfaction with the building. So important things for us are really looking outside and trying to see who, we can partner and add value with together, and then making sure we understand how that innovation drives ROI for the different roles and people inside the building.
That's great. So Darlene, let's look forward with respect to AI and machine learning. How is Plan-On and just the vast experience you have around the data side of things? How are you thinking about where AI and machine learning can be deployed to improve on data and reporting?
Well, we're already seeing utilization of automation, whether it's building automation systems, collecting data from the workplace, feeding it to the BMS, and allowing the building to operate based on real-time conditions. And as that continues, the building starts to learn. It starts to learn patterns. It starts to learn, in between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I always get hot calls from the southwest corner of the building. Therefore, I'm going to adjust. And the building starts to learn based on patterns, based on complaints, based on work orders, based on data that it's taking from the building itself, whether it's temperature data, indoor air quality data. So the building can start to optimize itself. So when you take a look at machine learning, AI, and the applications within the building, it does come down to making the building smart and making it automated. And, going back to the ROI question, we can't do any of this without digitization, without the ability to collect data around all the different operational functions of the building. And I think most of our customers are looking for some type of tangible ROI in the form of energy savings. And with ESG being such a huge component of that nowadays, whether it's energy savings, sustainability, environmental contribution to environmental stewardship, very, very high business driver. So the ability to have that data, to see trends on the data, and to automate is what supports the machine learning in the first place. So, I could name a case study of a project that I worked on where the building was getting literally 300 to 400 hot and cold calls every month. And by putting in a system that allowed the building to start to learn, as it continued to get hot calls or cold calls from certain areas, it would proactively heat or cool that area so that at the end of the day, it was able to reduce those hot and cold calls to less than 10 in a month. And taking it one step further to put the controls in the hands of the occupants using their IoT devices and location-based services, it not only learned how to condition the building better, but it learned the location of the people within the building in order to do that in a much more efficient manner. So I think we've only scratched the surface in terms of what machine learning and AI can do within facility management and within building operations overall.
And as we continue to see more flight to quality and new buildings come online and companies moving towards some of the newer buildings, I think to your point, hopefully there will be a lot more application of that insight.
Yeah.
And Nikisha, as we kind of, you see a lot of different client accounts across the marketplace. Do you see any gaps in where the industry can advance more in this area?
I think definitely the gap that I'm seeing and still has not bridged over yet is that data sharing between the design intent of a space, the construction, the operational, and then going full life cycle, whether it's decommissioning that space and reutilizing it and revamping it to something new. Very much those worlds, the different worlds of operations and construction still are very much separated. And those are the two key parts of how our operators will be better. If they understand the design intent of a space before it's delivered to them, if they understand and are part of the decision making in the actual equipment that's going to be installed into the building. And so very much that's starting to happen as we talk about sustainability and what makes it more efficient to operate a building. Those conversations are starting to have. But I always tell my wonderful architectural friends, like, we need to have those conversations with our chief engineers, with our facility managers, because we have to bridge those two worlds together so that we're getting the most efficiency out of the space, the best utilization out of the space. The worst thing for an on-site team is that something is designed, installed, and it doesn't work the way it was intended for. And so the new connection with IoT allows us to see that data immediately when we start seeing physical people in the space. But I think we can start doing that before we have people arrive on site and we're starting to see the learning. We can do that in advance. So for me, my dream is being able to, have a space delivered, and we've had those conversations during the design process, during the construction, and we're going through the process as a team to create this beautiful space that everyone will want to come into.
Just to add to what Nikisha mentioned, it's a really great point, because if you think about the kind of competing incentives, right, of the general contractors trying to get the price down as you're coming in and the consultant, it might be a relatively minor investment to add something to new equipment from an IoT side, like almost a rounding error in the overall equipment purchase. But it's much more painful to add it in after the fact in a modernization. And you have that mismatch between what was the intent of the space and a cost saving measure that might have happened in construction. So better communication across those teams really will benefit the facilities management and the operations team later down the line. That's something we see all the time, right? Really global. It doesn't matter what segment or space.
Yeah, and to that point, the seamless transition from one stage of the design intent into operations, that all can be in the system of truth, like an IWMS plan on. So I think, that is an area that so often I hear both from operations as well as for strategy, that things get lost in translation from one stage to the next. So we're sort of coming towards the end of our time in terms of the panel conversation, but I'd love to leave with one closing insight from each of you. The one best practice wisdom that you have around data to share with our audience today. I'll start with Brian, since you're on the top of the cube.
Sure. So I think, as the title implies, data everywhere really emphasizes the purpose of insights. Data in and of itself is not useful. And especially, coming from the OEM side or working with a variety of partners, the important thing is not to send everything over to your partners or everything over to the facilities management. The real sophistication or advancement is around having that knowledge to take the data, generate insights, and then serve things that are hopefully actionable to an operations team or to a partner, because that's really where you're going to get the ROI and the impact. So I think, yeah, that looking forward, that's what we've all been getting better at. I think we'll continue to improve also with the ML and AI aspects that Darlene and Nikisha mentioned before. But yeah, I think that is one of the critical things that makes this more real for everyone and continue to generate value as we advance every part of the value chain.
Thank you, Brian. Nikisha?
I would say, as we continue to focus more on learning alongside ML and AI, I think us as human beings will continuously be able to adapt with what they're learning and become better. So I think one key thing that as I've been looking at this new technology is that it won't remove me from the process. It actually leads me in the process, because to Brian's point, all that data means nothing unless someone's able to interpret it and being able to tell the story of how they're connecting together. So I feel like for the future of operations, we're going to be better storytellers, better operators, and also better stewards of the environment, because we're going to be thinking about the full cycle of a property and the space and the people along this whole process.
So just because the robots are coming doesn't mean humans are going away, huh? All right. And Darlene, please share our final closing wisdom.
Yeah, so I would say it's really critical to have that single source of truth. The challenge now with managing all the data is that it's in so many different point solutions, and a lot of times that data is in conflicting point solutions. So even just taking occupancy, you've got badge swipe data, you've got network login data, you've got sensor data, you've got CCTV camera data, and you've got multiple data sets that don't always match up. So, having that single source of truth and the ability to integrate your different building systems is the only way that you're going to be able to get optimization, automation, and that highest level of efficiency. If you have data in different systems, if you've got data in different platforms and you can't share the data, or if you've got it conflicting, you're not going to be able to really optimize your facilities. So I think that's what's really important, is having a data strategy. Starting off with documenting and doing an inventory of all the different data sources that you have, and starting to consolidate those so that you do determine what is your single source of truth, what is the ultimate, source of that data, and making sure that you've got good data to work with, because, they say garbage in, garbage out. So you can be getting terabytes of data, but if it's not accurate data and it's not real-time data, or if it's conflicting with something else, you're never going to be able to really achieve what you're trying to do with IoT. So my final word is single source of truth and ability to integrate, so that we can actually automate, digitize, and ultimately reach that highest level of efficiency.
That's great. Well, this has been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate all the diverse perspectives that you guys bring to the table from different sides of the industry. I think we have time for some questions. We'll move into the questions at this point. Take a quick look at what has come through. Let's see. Okay, so let's start with the first question. So going back to AI, so Nikisha, one of the questions is there any concern that the IoT data will show that AI will eliminate human roles within corporate real estate? Or will it help our operations truly be smarter for the greater good or be more sustainable?
I definitely believe that there will be some elimination, right? I think there will be an elimination of the amount of time that we need to do certain roles. But I still truly believe that we as the operators have the ability to take that data, that same as machine learning and AI is happening, that we'll be able to manage people. I think what we've seen too is that people want to connect with each other. And so the on-site teams are who everyone comes into the office and knows who to go to when they need some help. So whether they're putting in a work order into the system, they're still reaching out to their facilities team to see them in person, to know that someone's listening to them. I think because that's the other part of this. It's the hospitality, the care, and the concern that we offer in that space that I don't think is going to go away, that actually I think is evolving more, because in order for people to be in the office, they want to know that there are people there who care about them and what they're experiencing in the space.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have a couple of comments that have come through. So one, thank you, Carrie Dreyer, for your comment. Carrie shared with us, I could also see the other ROI benefit to your building owners and FMs is sharing this data with vendor partners who can adjust cleaning schedules, landscaping work, because the traffic patterns in the office, as you referenced before, could optimize the schedule maintenance of the property, as an example. Thank you. And then another question has come through, Rob Chambers, any suggestions for quick wins or value demonstration that could be used on a small scale in order to win people over and build momentum? So it sounds like Rob needs to build a case for change. Darlene or Brian, either one of you want to take that one?
Yeah, so, what was challenging during COVID is that most buildings ran on a normal time schedule when they were completely vacant, because several reasons. First of all, in a commercial environment, the lease required them to. And so if the building owners didn't run the buildings, then the tenants would have an argument to not pay their rent, right? So I think we have to look at, in terms of what are the quick wins. The quick wins are running the building based on actual occupancy. We've seen case studies with large portfolios that are literally taking occupancy data and feeding it to the BMS and saving anywhere from 30 to 40% of their energy costs, because they're not running the building based on a full building. So I think that is the quickest, shortest win. And we're doing a lot of POCs, proofs of concept, with our customers to be able to give them that data and allow them to make decisions using that data. But number one has been energy savings based on real-time occupancy. So to me, that would be not only a small scale, but also a big scale win. But also the comment, absolutely, in terms of cleaning, why are we vacuuming offices that weren't used that day? Why are we going in and even checking to see if there's garbage in the trash bin in that room? So taking that location-based occupancy data, which is very easy to collect, by the way, putting it on a digital floor plan and providing that data to the cleaning company when they come in at night, shows them exactly what offices, what spaces were used, so that you don't have to clean areas that were not utilized. So that may also require some different type of contract mechanism with your cleaning company. But these are the types of use cases that can deliver immediate value, immediate ROI.
Thanks, Darlene. So we have one question that has come through. Does certain equipment OEMs proprietary software cause issues in communicating with BMS systems? If so, how can you overcome that? So we're of a marketplace that is maturing in IoT. So broadly, how do you tie things together that are not ready to be tied together?
Yeah. So I think from the Otis side, and I think honestly many of the other OEMs, at least in the elevator space or in other areas in mechanical systems, you try to use common protocols, right? So it's not about trying to crack the proprietary software. It's about understanding what are the important data points that are needed to make those insights and to kind of gather that data and then be able to transmit them in a way that's agreed upon. That could be Modbus or BACnet if it's an on-premise system that people want to be able to connect from system to system. Or as things become more advanced, as I mentioned, it could be APIs, either RESTful APIs or WebSocket APIs, depending on the type of information that needs to be done and what that connection is. In any of those situations, there's very typically definitions that can be shared, documentation that can be shared to get that information that's needed to make those decisions. In our case, we even have a sandbox environment that we've set up and a developer portal that we've set up from Otis, where you can test kind of pulling information from live elevator controllers that sit in our R&D lab in Connecticut. So Of course, there are always elements of the black box that people are trying to get into, but in general, I've seen that working with our facilities management partners or ecosystem partners, there's very common data sets that are needed to be able to achieve value in some of the ROI Darlene mentioned. And we use common protocols to be able to transmit that information, both on-premise or cloud-based.
Great, thanks, Brian. All right, so we have a LinkedIn architect that submitted a question. I'd like to know if there is some buildings that you consider good examples nowadays since concept until operations. Any best-in-class buildings that you have visited or that you're operating or is part of your client accounts?
So I'll probably give a shout out to my Hines team at the Hudson Square portfolio. We've got an amazing project at 55 Greenwich that's connecting to 345 Hudson, and some really cool things happening on the IoT and energy cost savings and operations for that building that I'm excited. I can't share all of it, but definitely it's coming on the market and it's an awesome new building.
Yeah, I would say we have countless use cases, countless case studies, and customers that are utilizing IoT for occupancy detection and energy management currently. Those aren't public case studies yet, but we will be publishing a lot of those. But it is very common, I would say, and the demand, going back to the question about proprietary software, I think that anyone who still has proprietary software that you can't integrate is going to fade out very quickly because the demand from building owners and end users is going to be open protocol. So we have hundreds, literally hundreds of customers that we could point to be able to show the application of IoT within the workplace and the benefits that they're seeing not only from space management, but also operational savings, energy management. So look for some formal case studies being published sometime soon.
Thanks, Darlene. Okay, one more question from Mohammed Rastami. Is tagging objects, devices, and humans for tracking a practically attractive approach to attain more high-quality location data? Do humans want to be tracked?
Oh, how much time?
We already are.
Right. So it's an interesting conversation. I could talk for days about this, but we do live in a world of location-based services. We use our cell phones for GPS all the time. We use it for location-based services like ordering an Uber. Can you imagine ordering an Uber and they don't know where you are? Opening up the weather channel to see what the weather's like and it doesn't know what city you're in. Find a restaurant near me now, find my friends, et cetera, et cetera. So we've gotten very used to a world that lives based on location-based services that are tied to the location of your device. And I don't think we've really taken advantage of the power of that within a building. I recently was on a flight. I landed at Newark Airport and I got a push notification that you're landing at this gate and your connecting gate is over here. And it had a blue dot, to show me how to get from point A to point B and all of the points of interest along the way, whether it's a restaurant or the United Club or whatever the case may be. We're seeing the application of location-based services and IoT in retail. That's been probably a decade of IoT and location-based services. We see it now in shopping malls. Instead of going to a map that says you are here, you pick up your phone and it's you are here. We're seeing the application of it on college campuses. Instead of having to look for a blue light and run to a phone in the middle of the night if there's an emergency, you literally pick up your phone and say help, and immediately campus security knows your location and is able to respond. So I don't consider it tracking. I consider it location-based services. And as long as you can add value to the individual, we are willing to give up our location in exchange for value that it brings to us. So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see many, many, many more use cases for location-based services within our buildings, including occupancy detection, temperature and lighting control, services, whether it's concierge services or other types of services that the building can provide. So Stay tuned. That's going to be a big disruptor within real estate.
I think one thing I'd also add to that is just in thinking of our experience each day, we're being tracked as soon as we leave our doors. One of the best use cases that I saw, I went to Cretech last year, and Uber was discussing their transportation services and being able to provide their employees with the ability from their phones to be notified if the parking garage was full by the time they were leaving their house to get to the office based on their staggered flex work schedules. And to me, that was one thing that in New York, we don't have so much that problem because we're a metropolitan city. But if you're thinking anywhere outside of major cities where people are commuting by driving, the technology that's now available to map out your day, the traffic pattern, how you're going to get to the office, to the parking garage, having a map that'll, same thing to your point of landing in an airport, dot out how you get to your parking spot, to the elevator, thinking of the employee experience, that is a ROI that I think for a lot of us, when we're thinking about life experience, we want to make things easier, more efficient, and time is key for everyone. So we're adding time and value to people. They 100% will have that buy-in for the tracking. I love being in a building that has a gym that I can work out in. There's a restaurant. There may be a Whole Foods. I can map out my entire day based on the workplace app that I might have, my buildings app, and being able to integrate entirely how I want to plan out my day. And for me, however, I'm being more efficient to be enjoying the life that I want to live, I think that's where we're leading to. And by 2050, we're going to be so connected, we won't even remember this conversation.
Sure. Well, even like, how long is the line in the cafeteria right now? Is there a treadmill available in the gym if I want to go to the gym right now? What's the line at TSA pre-check so I know when I need to leave my house to make my flight on time? I mean, the value of that data to the end user is tremendous. We've only scratched the surface.
Yes, and for commutes too, right? So
Absolutely.
I would love to know when I'm not going to be able to get to the office because something is not running right. So no, that's I look forward to that day. And Nikisha, by then we will have augmented memory assisted devices so that we can remember this conversation.
Well, even think of the value in terms of safety and security. I mean, if there's a fire in the building, do you want the fire department to know where you are? There's 8 people stuck in a conference room on the 8th floor. On a college campus, if there's an emergency, do you want them to be able to find you? So, yeah, I'm a big proponent for location-based services.
All right. So perhaps one final question. Lots of corporate ChatGPT capabilities being brought online. Any additional, I guess, crystal balling insights around how ChatGPT might change up the industry?
This is a Pandora's box when you start getting into ChatGPT and AI and blurring the lines between virtual and real. And I think you get to a place where, perception is reality. And so as you start to take a look at additional applications of AI within real estate and AI within facility management, I mean, we haven't even talked about digital twins. And I think that, as we start to collect real-time data around building operations, and we can take 3D models and overlay that data onto a 3D model and literally create a digital twin that's a kind of a living, breathing, operating digital replica of the building. In the future, we're going to end up being able to run buildings like we're flying through Minecraft. We'll have virtual reality headsets on and be able to literally building engineers sitting from home, adjusting things on the BMS or tweaking things on the chiller or seeing the temperature of the water coming out of the chiller and really running buildings in a much more virtual world. So I think that the capability is there now. I think the applications are not fully developed. And then I think there's also the change management and the acceptance of that type of technology and how long that could potentially take to become mainstream. So again, I think we've only scratched the surface in what AI can do.
It's happening in small use cases.
Right.
Brian, you had mentioned that your team is looking at remote servicing, right? So you have your own sort of use case around your version of digital twins, but for the elevators. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the applications, to Darlene's point, it starts to become around data acceptance, right? Because it's not ChatGPT per se, because there's, you're kind of looking at, okay, what data am I going to make public first? How do I set up kind of my own instance or own substantiation of that type of AI? So yeah, being able to look across, installation instructions and technical manuals, and hopefully be able to kind of quickly troubleshoot things from a maintenance and service perspective. That's something that's certainly on the horizon, I think, throughout the facility's value chain. And that's something that, a lot of different OEMs have started to evaluate. And it really kind of comes down to what, basically, what the investment's made to be able to take that, and what kind of data security looks like from place to place.
And with that, we're out of time. We could have gone on for another couple of hours. I really appreciate all of your time and your expertise, and appreciate our audience for joining us today. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.